Okay, good morning. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be making beef bourguignon today, okay, which is a very classic French dish, best known in America because of Julia Child. And Julia Child was one of my cooking idols growing up. I used to watch her all the time on PBS, and she's one of the main reasons I got involved in culinary. So we're going to make a dish in honor of her today, beef bourguignon. Okay, this was one of her most famous dishes from her book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, which really brought French cooking techniques to America for the first time back in the middle 20th century. So we're going to start off by taking some beef chuck, beef shoulder, which I'll show you how to cut in a minute, even though I've already cut it. And then we're going to cook that in some bacon. We're also going to add some veggies. We have onions and carrots. And because this is a braised dish, we're going to be adding some liquid. So we're going to be using both red wine and beef stock. And we're also going to use a couple of other things to flavor it, including some tomato paste and some garlic. And we're going to use a little bit of flour, which will help thicken the braising liquid at the end. Okay, so we're going to start with our beef chuck. Alright, so the chuck is the shoulder of the cow. And if you think about a cow standing on all four legs, supporting all of its weight, hundreds and hundreds of pounds, the shoulders are doing a lot of work. Alright, so if a muscle in the animal is doing a lot of work, it's going to be tougher. So you wouldn't take this and slice it up and throw it on the grill and expect it to be tender like a nice steak. Alright, this is going to be a very tough cut of meat, so we have to transform it. And the way that we're going to transform it is by braising it in our beef burgundy dish today, our beef bourguignon. Okay? So we're going to start off by cutting this into big chunks. Okay, I'm going to go right down the middle. And I'm going to cut it into good sized chunks like this. Like that. Alright, so we've got our pot on the stove. We're using a cast iron enameled crock because this is going to be cooked on the stovetop as well as in the oven. So right now we're starting off from the stovetop. We've got our pan going, high heat. We're going to add a little bit of olive oil to the pan, maybe about a tablespoon or two. And the very first thing that we're going to put in is our bacon. Now, if you remember the last recipe that I did, which was the corn chowder, we were looking to render the bacon, right? Which meant we were going to get just the fat out. But this time we actually want the bacon to crisp up a little bit. So I'm going to do it at a little higher heat. We're still going to get the fat out of it, but we're going to look for the bacon to crisp up a little bit. This is going to take a couple of minutes to get the bacon crispy, and then when the bacon is done, we're going to take it out of the pot and just leave the fat in. Okay, a couple minutes later and our bacon has gotten nice and crispy. Turn the heat down a little bit. I'm going to use my slotted spoon here to take it out. Drain the fat off. Now don't worry, we are going to use this bacon later. I'm not wasting it. I just don't want it to get overcooked when we start cooking the other things. We need to make room in the pan for the next thing to go in, which is going to be our beef. I'm going to finish taking this bacon out. And then we're going to add the beef. Okay, we're about ready to sear our beef. While the bacon was cooking, I also turned our oven on to 350. We want that to be preheated for when the rest of the dish is ready to go in there. So now we're going to take our beef and we're going to sear it. Alright, so what searing means is very high heat and the meat is totally dry, so it's going to get a nice brown crust on it. So into the pot goes the beef. Might not have enough room to do it all at once, but we're going to see. Yeah, there's not enough room in the pot, so I'm going to do it in 2 batches. And here's the first batch. Okay, we're a couple of minutes into searing this beef here. Let's take a look at it. getting nice and brown. That means it's ready to be turned over. Turn them all over. Give them a couple minutes on the other side and we'll do the next batch. Take the last of our meat out of the pot now. You can see it's nice and seared. Okay, I'm going to leave that bacon grease in there. And next is going to go our vegetables. Okay, so we've got our carrots. I did what's called an oblique or roll cut. So they're kind of a rustic looking cut right there. But they're all about the same size. Our carrots are going to go in there. And our onions. Okay, and I also diced the onions pretty large because these are going to cook for a long time. It's going to cook for about 4 hours in the oven. And if we cut them too small, by the time they're done, they're going to be disappeared. We don't want that. We want still some big chunks of onion. Okay, so we're going to cook this now for about 3 or 4 minutes in the bacon fat. Okay, we're a couple of minutes into sauteing our carrots and onions in the bacon fat right here. Now is a good time for us to season. Okay, so we're going to get the cracked pepper in there. And some salt. Give that a stir. And while we're here, let's add our garlic as well. Okay, so that was a couple of cloves of chopped garlic, 3 or 4 cloves of chopped garlic. Okay, I'm going to let that cook for a few more minutes. One thing you need to watch right now is to make sure that your heat's not too high or your garlic might burn. We don't want that. Burnt garlic will absolutely ruin the dish, so make sure once the garlic goes in there that the heat's not too high. Alright, now that our veggies have been cooked, carrots are starting to get a little bit tender. The onions, we don't want to overcook them in here because again they're going to keep cooking for a long time. So now we are ready to build the dish itself. Okay, so we've got our carrots, onions, and garlic in there. Now we're going to return the bacon to the pan. And we're going to add the beef back in also. Okay. So add the chunks of beef back in here, along with any drippings that may have came off the beef onto the plate. There's a lot of good flavor there, we don't want to waste that. Okay, so add all that back in there. One step that you could take before you do this is to drain the excess fat if you want to, but we didn't have a lot of extra fat, so we're going to skip that step. Okay. So now we've got our beef back in here, our bacon. The next thing we're going to do is add some of our flour. Okay, I mentioned earlier that we have flour. Now usually you think of flour and fat making a roux, right? So that's essentially what we're going to do here. But because we're making a classic French dish here, I'm going to, a big fancy French dish, I'm going to throw a fancy French cooking term at you. And we're going to do what's called singer, S-I-N-G-E-R. Okay, singer means to take flour and kind of dust all the food with it. Okay, so basically it's like you're making a roux, except the meat and vegetables are already in the pan. So we're going to dust all the veggies with the flour and then stir it up. And this is going to mix with the bacon fat and the olive oil that we put in earlier. And it's going to create kind of like a mini roux in the pan here. And doing this is going to ensure that we have a nice thick braising liquid at the end of the dish. Okay, you're not going to see it right away, but after 4 hours you're going to see that it's thickened up. I'm actually going to put a little bit more flour in. So singer, you're kind of drizzling, or dusting I should say, dusting the meat and vegetables with the flour, and then mixing it in. Okay, we've allowed the flour to cook, the flavor of the flour to cook out a little bit. Now you see the bottom of the pan there, you got lots of delicious brown bits there, right? Remember from the last video, that's called fond, F-O-N-D. So the next thing we're going to do is add in our red wine. Okay, we're using a Pinot Noir wine, and we're going to use 3 cups of that. It's a lot of wine. Go right into the pot with that, and that's going to deglaze the pan, which means that all those brown bits are going to come off the bottom. Okay, we're also going to add 2 cups of beef stock in at this time. as well. Okay, our beef bourguignon has been stewing on the stove for a little bit here now. It's simmered. Notice that the liquid is just covering the meat. Okay, that's about how much liquid you want to have in there. If you put the 3 cups of wine in and the 2 cups of stock and you find that you don't have enough, just add a little bit more stock or a little bit more wine to make sure that the beef is covered. The next thing we're going to do is add the tomato paste and then put it in the oven. Okay, I'm going to get about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste in there. I'm going to stir that in. And then it's going to go in the oven for 3 to 4 hours, basically until the meat is like tender enough that it's falling apart. Which will take a while because we cut this into big chunks. You could cut it into smaller pieces and it would cook a little bit quicker. But I think it's better to cook it for a long time. It really develops the flavors. And notice too, while I'm stirring this tomato paste in, it's getting a little bit darker. I'm also scraping the bottom of the pan, because I want all of those little brown bits of fond to come off and into the sauce. This is going to be a very flavorful braising liquid for this meat. And we're transforming this very tough cut of meat into something that's going to be really tender when it's all done. Alright, let's cover it and get it in the oven. Okay, we're going to put that in there about 3 or 4 hours. Okay, 4 hours have gone by. Pan is out of the oven. Let's see how our beef looks. Alright. You can see a lot of the liquid is evaporated and it's gotten a lot thicker. The good thing about that is it doesn't look like we're going to need to really thicken this sauce at all. It's pretty thick on its own. Next step is going to be to cook the mushrooms, and then we're going to be ready to serve this over our noodles. Okay, our next step is going to be to saute these mushrooms. So, I've got some quartered mushrooms right here, ready to go in. We're going to wait until this butter melts. And move it around the pan a little bit. I want the foam to go down before we put the mushrooms in. But we don't want it to get too dark though, so we're going to turn the heat down just a little. Okay, now the reason we're cooking the mushrooms at the end as opposed to putting it in with the rest of the stew is we don't want them to cook away to nothing. We want them to hold their shape a little bit. Alright, so those are going to go in the pan along with a little bit of garlic. I'm going to put some garlic in there as well. A little bit more of this chopped garlic in there. And we're going to cook these for a couple of minutes and we're going to add them to the beef. Okay, these mushrooms have got some nice color on them. They've cooked down a little bit, got a little soft. I think they're ready to go into the pot of beef. Add that. And we're going to stir it up. This is now ready to be served. So once our noodles are done, we're going to put them in the bowl and see how it looks. And here's our final dish. Beef bourguignon on egg noodles with a nice piece of crusty sourdough bread. Thanks for watching.